What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Mermaid Vet Podcast. Now, you might notice this is not the normal introduction you get from Tim at the start of the episode, and that's because we had so much content in last week's episode, we decided to split it out into two parts. And so in this second part, we're going to pick up right where we left off. We're going to talk about supplements. We're going to talk about case studies that we saw in clinic, and we're going to talk about red flags to be watching for when you're making decisions in your dog's diet. I really like this episode. There's a lot of little nuggets of wisdom, a lot of candid information that we're able to provide. And so stay tuned and I hope you enjoy.
Let's move on from the from weight management, just on the supplements, right? Just like humans, some pets take supplements, kind of help them out. I've got a list of them here. Let's talk about omega-3s first.
So omega-3s I have a little bit of controversy between me and some other vets based on their usefulness. Omega-3s I think can be useful for skin because they help to replenish the oils in the skin. But I think that they're a lot less useful in another way that they're used, which is for joint health. So my understanding of joint health is that it matters less the total amount of omega-3s that a dog is taking than the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids. The problem, going back to our AFCO statements, is that is the minimum, right? That tells you that your dog shouldn't get sick from eating this food. It should give them the basic requirements. It doesn't mean it's optimized. So an optimized food would have a better omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acid ratio. The way that they're made right now for most foods, and it's hard to drill down and get this information on a brand or product level, but the omega-6 content is too high to be able to get the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio that you're looking for. And if you were to supplement the omega-3s high enough to get that ratio, you'd give your dog blowout oily diarrhea. So if you're looking for omega-3s for joint supplementation, best thing I can recommend is to take the money you would be spending on those supplements and to actually go towards a food that is going to have that correct ratio. The one that I use, the one I've actually just taken my dog's back off of recently, is Royal Canin Mobility Support OS. And so I've actually seen benefit from that, but it is again, it's an expensive food because they're taking the time to figure out that ratio and to make sure it's correct. So that's omega-3s.
All right. Let's move right on into probiotics.
Sure.
Tell me about their usefulness. How do you give it to them? Maybe some suggestions.
Probiotics can definitely be useful. I guess the best way I think about probiotics is how useful they are for a particular pet. So if you've got a pet with a very sensitive stomach, if they get frequent stress diarrhea, if they get frequent diarrhea from slight changes in environment or slight changes in food, a probiotic could definitely be a benefit. It's going to help to regulate the bacteria in their gut, stop it from swinging too far one way or another, and hopefully stop them from needing to come into the clinic. But for most dogs, probiotics probably not going to be harmful, just like for most people, probiotics not going to be harmful, but I don't know that it's absolutely necessary. So if it makes you feel better, or if you have a dog that gets diarrhea easily, go for it. To my knowledge, there's not much harm that can come from using them unnecessarily.
Nice. And then I also have another category, jumping back a little bit. You mentioned the omegas are good for some joint supplements. But are there any other joint support supplements that you would recommend or just any other separate ones aside from the omegas?
Yeah, absolutely. So in joint supplements, generally what we're looking for is glucosamine, chondroitin. So those are the two, or an equivalent compound. Those are ingredients that make up kind of the building blocks of the cartilage that pads joints. And the thought process is that if we give more of these to dogs, they'll be able to utilize them to rebuild that cartilage in their joints to stave off arthritis. Most of the differentiation between the different joint supplements out there comes in the form of whatever antioxidant that they use. So an antioxidant is going to be something that helps to scavenge free radicals, and it will help to bring down inflammation is basically the idea behind it. So every different joint supplement seems to have their own proprietary antioxidant that they say is better for whatever reason it might be, whether it's green lip sea mussel or eggshell membrane or whatever the case might be. They have their one extra ingredient that separates them, that makes theirs better. But I've never really seen a good comparison of one versus the other because they all are additive. They've all got white papers to say that they do something beneficial, but I haven't ever seen something that says this one is definitively better than this one. So it's hard to say one versus the other. For me, it's whatever one works for your budget and whichever one works for your dog that they actually take it. Now that I've said that, I have to contradict myself. One difference that I would say is if you're giving glucosamine chondroitin, it does matter to a certain extent the bioavailability of those compounds. So if you're just giving nature's own chondroitin off the shelf, wherever the case might be, I don't actually know how it's marketed, but if you're just giving them chondroitin in a big chunk or in a way that's not easily broken down by the body, then there's a good chance that it's just going to pass through them. So there's a good chance that you're spending money on something that's not harming, but it's probably not doing well. Oh, that was the next
All right.
question you were going to ask.
Yeah, you kind of breezed right through it. So I was going to
Sure.
preface with you sound somewhat skeptical and not 100% in on any of these supplements. So I was going to ask you what you thought was worth it and what's not, and you've kind of already gone through that for me. How about this? I've got one last question in the supplements category, right? How do you avoid unregulated Amazon knockoffs? So, right, we're always looking for the best deal, the quickest shipment. Hey, look at this, some advertisement, you know, they're tracking what you're looking at and they see you need this item and Amazon can sell it to you for cheap. How do we avoid this? How do we make the right decisions here?
So I don't have a ton of experience with Amazon knockoffs, but it's also something that I'm not going to necessarily have a ton of experience with, because that's the recommendation I would give, would be to speak to your veterinarian and ask for their recommendations. And that's how you would avoid it. So usually if I'm giving a recommendation, it's not one of those. And if a client's coming to me and asking about it, I won't recommend it because I don't know about it and I have no proof on where it's coming from or how it works. So again, not to say that there couldn't be some good ones, but generally speaking, I would go with a known source, with American manufacturing if you can, and speak to your veterinarian about it and see if they have opinions on it.
All right. Now, always my favorite part of the podcast, where I get to bring you very real scenarios of what I see walking the clinic, things I hear clients say, and I get to see your take on it and how you would explain it, right? And it's even better because since the client's not right in front of you, you get to even be more as honest as possible about your answers on these, right? So here are a few scenarios, right? The itchy dog whose owner keeps switching foods.
So this is one that I will see where, like I mentioned, there's a misconception that food allergies cause a higher number of itchy dogs than they actually do. And so what I'll see sometimes is a dog that will come in and its whole back end is raw and it's lost its hair. And this client is telling me that I've done every single thing possible. I've switched him. I've gone from only chicken food. I know that causes allergies. And so I switched him over to beef, and then I switched him over to venison. And now he's on pure kangaroo, 100% kangaroo diet, imported straight from Australia, no fillers, no byproducts. Yep. And so I just, I don't know what to do. I've done all the things. Meanwhile, he's got fleas all over his back end, which is the cause of the itching. So it's something that I'll see sometimes where that's kind of a first impulse and there might be something else causing it. One of the other ones that I'll talk to clients sometimes about, especially if they have a dog that is of a breed that is more prone to develop allergies. So your Frenchies, any bully breed basically seems to be more prone to developing allergies, especially if they have white fur. But one of the things I'll mention to them sometimes is they'll say, well, I'd like to switch it up. I like to switch up my diet. I want them to have a good variety as well. So I'll use this one this time, and another one another time. And sometimes I'll recommend to try to not bring in any additional protein sources, because even though that hydrolyzed diet is the best, sometimes we can get away with using what's called a novel source protein diet, where you use something like venison, like kangaroo, something that the dog's body shouldn't have been able to have seen before and shouldn't have developed a reaction to be able to use for a food trial.
Before we move on to the next topic, just quick something I want to dig in on, just because I'm in the vet industry, newer to the vet industry, always learning, right? And I have learned the statement that you made, it always seems to be true, but why? Why is it with the white coats that we see more of the allergy issues with the pets?
Oh, I've got no idea.
It's just a fact. Okay.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's definitively been proven. It's just something I've seen anecdotally. Bully breeds with white fur seem to be more prone to getting allergies. There are other, it's not to say that there's never a connection. There are disease processes that we'll notice with a particular breed, with a particular fur coat color that ties to something else. But so there are real things that actually do correlate like that. But in this case, it might be just similar. It's going to be overbreeding for a particular trait that has caused another genetic marker to overrepresent itself. It's probably the most likely scenario.
I guess polydactyl is not enough for the breeding, huh?
Yep.
Okay. Let's do another one. I love this one. The overweight cat on free feeding.
So this one is actually one that a case that I covered yesterday when I was in clinic, coming back for the first time in a little while off of paternity leave. I had a client that came in with their cat, weight concerns for a younger cat. So it's a great time to talk about it. But I asked how serious they were about taking care of this issue and getting their cat's weight back under control. And the reason I asked it is because it's difficult to do. So it's not something that you take on lightly. It is a big pain in the butt. And in this case, they were saying that the one cat eats the other cat's food, right? So you have two cats in the household, and this is a big one, where one cat eats a little bit slower than the other cat finishes their food and then steals the first one's food. And then asked, well, are they fed separately? Are they fed at the same time? Are they fed different times? And I think they were eating out of the same bowl. So I was like, well, yeah, that'll do it for sure. Yeah, Porky over there is going to eat it all. So that's something that I'll see pretty commonly. The way to get around that in a single cat household is to make sure you're controlling the food that they take in. So if you have an overweight cat, you get the amount of food that they should be getting for their weight, and you make sure first that you're staying at least to that. And then with cats, we'll really slowly dial it back because they don't lose weight very well. They can make themselves really sick if it happens too fast. And in a multi-cat household, what we'll have to do sometimes is to actually either separate them. The low-tech way is to separate them when they're eating. So you put one cat in one room with their bowl until they're done. You put the other cat in the other room with the bowl until they're done. You don't let them cross paths so they can't steal each other's food. That can be difficult to do. The modern technological solution to that is a microchip triggered feeder. So there are two feeding trays with little plastic covers. You put a microchip tag on the cat's collar. When they walk over, the RFID on the feeder reads the tag, and it slides the little tray back so the cat can eat. That's going to be one of the ways you can do it. You can also use, if you have a single cat household, timed feeders. So just basically getting back to giving them the food that we think we're giving them.
All right. We got another fun one here. You know, the whole myth of my dog's a wolf and it eats raw food, right? So we're feeding our chihuahua raw feed, right? So this is a raw fed pet with chronic diarrhea.
This could be a couple different reasons. One of the first suspicions that I would have if I had this patient come in, though, would be touching back on what we talked about in the last episode, the food part 1 or diet part 1. And that would be that when you have raw food without a kill step in the processing of that food, the bacteria that's in there is going to have a chance to grow, to multiply. And even though your dog has the ability in most cases to survive eating that bacteria, their stomach's not necessarily killing it. It might be passing through. And if it's the wrong type of bacteria, it can cause inflammation. It can overpopulate their gut. It can cause diarrhea. So that would be my biggest suspicion. One of the things we touched on too, that I'll harp on again, because I think it's really important, is that if you have a dog being fed raw meat from an animal that is being given antibiotics during its growing process, which is often done, then the bacteria that's on that cow and in that meat, or that gets into that meat, is potentially going to have antibiotic resistance as well. So there's a good chance that in 5 to 8 years, we're going to create a big nightmare for ourselves if this trend continues.
Absolutely. Let's see. Let's move on to the older pets. We've got a senior dog that's thriving on a kidney support diet.
Two things that I'd be suspicious for here. So the presentation is that it's a senior dog. It's not necessarily that it's a dog in kidney failure. And so I would wonder about that, how this dog's kidneys are doing. If it is a dog that needs that kidney support diet, the diet itself is a little controversial. And the reason for that is because, as I mentioned earlier, the kidneys filter out protein for the body. So that's how you stop protein leaking into your urine. That's how you stop losing those nutrients, is that when your blood passes through the kidneys, its filter catches all that protein, make sure it stays inside the blood. Everything else passes out that needs to pass out. So what the kidney support diets do is they have a lower protein content in them to try to give those filters a break. So if the kidneys aren't working as well, one of the concerns is that those filters might be breaking down. You might be losing protein into the urine. And so they reduce the amount of protein in the food itself. The reason why this has become a little more controversial recently is that one of the other symptoms we'll see from kidney insufficiency is that these dogs will have a tougher time, and seniors in general will have a tougher time maintaining their muscle mass, just like humans do. So if you have difficulty maintaining muscle mass and now you're feeding a lower protein based diet, are you causing them to have an even tougher time? Are you creating other problems like arthritis? Because as those muscles atrophy, as they get smaller, those joints are less supported, they become more wobbly, potentially could be causing more pain. That's being questioned and being researched right now. So if you have a dog that's thriving on it, that's one thing that I would look at. Could it be because it's got that low protein? Could it be that it's got, again, if it's got kidney issues, it's also got a lower potassium content. So that's the way that prescription diet is formulated. But I would have a lot of questions because typically kidney support diets are labeled by AAFCO to be nutritionally sound only for specific cases. So we talked about a complete and balanced or for all life stages label before. This wouldn't have that. This would be a prescription diet that has a specific meaning. So I would be happy that he's doing well, but I would have questions for that owner for why we got put on that in the first place. And I'd probably encourage them to move over to another senior diet instead, which I don't think I'd have too much difficulty with because it's probably cheaper.
That is a big part of decision making, huh?
Yeah. And I guess we said kidney support. We didn't say that it was prescription. So I guess I'd have to know what the diet consists of. But that's my thoughts initially, at least.
Let's do one more case example. Okay. We talked earlier about buzzwords, marketing. What about that client that chooses food based solely on the label marketing? You know, again, whatever celebrity's pushing it, whatever ad they're seeing the most of, that's how they choose.
Yeah. So Rachel Imes employed Rachel Ray for a while to promote their one of their grain feed diets. And I laughed so hard at that because I was like, Rachel Ray doesn't know anything about making dog food. Like, I understand she's a celebrity chef. She can make some tasty human food, but that's for feeding people, not dogs. And I was laughing with someone one day where I was saying, you would never see this go the other way. You would never be like, oh my God, did you hear Iams is making frozen dinners now? I'm going to run out and buy that because Iams makes great dog food. So I'm going to go buy that food for myself. You never see it go the other way.
Well, have you heard about Paula Deen's buttered biscuits? I mean, they're fantastic for dogs.
So no, I maybe won't tell that exact story, but I'll try to gently move them away. We'll talk about, just like with grain-free diets, why maybe it's not the best choice for their pet from a scientific basis.
All great answers. Let's move on to the lightning round red flags, right?
Okay.
I'm throwing this one on you last second. We have a lot of these things we've kind of touched base on a little here and there. So in order to try to keep the information lighter and not just repeat ourselves too much, I'm going to give you about 10 to 15 seconds on each one of these red flags.
And say, don't wax poetic about everything, Mosites.
Yeah. Let's see what you got here. 10 to 15 seconds. I'm going to tell you a red flag or like a common myth that we need to avoid, and you're going to give me the lowdown, quick, dirty on it. You ready?
Let's do it.
Grain-free is healthier.
It's not. Grain-free has been tied to promoting heart disease in certain dogs. There's no proof that dogs get celiac disease. It is a pure marketing ploy that started off as something harmless and became something potentially harmful to dogs. So grain-free is not healthier.
All right. Meal. We talked earlier about meal platter. Meal attached as an ingredient is low quality.
So I think you might be mixing them up. This might be like beef meal, chicken meal versus something else.
Gotcha.
That typically is an indication of how it is processed. So it means that I believe it's dried out and ground up. If they were in the wild, as so many people like to say, they would be eating a lot of those whole foods. So meal is a way to be able to get a lot of nutrients in a smaller package. So if you have beef meal, chicken meal, Bone meal, it's taking the nutrients from the fully formed, hydrated version of it, and it's condensing it down. So it's a way to be able to get more nutrition in a smaller package. Just like when we talk about using like whey protein in a protein shake for a human, you'd say, well, why don't you just drink 6 gallons of milk? We know because that's too much. So that's the best way to say meal. So meal attached to an ingredient not needed as low quality is an indication of how it is processed. How it is processed usually has a specific purpose. Boom.
Very nice. It was long, but you got it there at the end there. And also the reason we don't drink 6 gallons of milk is it will not fit in the fridge. All right. Ready for the next one?
Yep.
Byproducts are bad.
Byproducts are bad. That would have been a better story one. So one of the favorite thing about byproducts are bad is when a client comes in and says, I don't feed my dog kibble because it's full of byproduct. I feed them liver straight from the butcher shop. And I gently let them know, sir, ma'am, liver is a meat byproduct. So byproduct for meat specifically is anything from the animal that is not muscle. So the muscle is the meat, the kidneys, the liver, the offal, the like everything else is all byproduct. So generally speaking, it's not bad, it's not good, it's just what it is. And often I will find clients will avoid byproducts and then feed their animal different byproducts because it's just a misunderstanding of what the word means.
All right. Next one. We talked earlier about wolves. Wolves don't eat corn.
They probably do if they need to in the wild. Corn's just not around as readily. So wolves are technically omnivores, just like dogs are. They grew up eating, they evolved eating our scraps. So there's a good chance that a wolf, if it needed to, would eat corn. But yeah, your dog is also not a wolf, just like your hybrid is not a steam engine. So they don't use the same sources of fuel, even though they are evolutionarily linked.
All right. Staying in the same realm, raw food is more natural.
It's not. Raw food is just going to be more prone to spoilage, more prone to bacterial overgrowth, and more prone to spreading of resistant bacteria for the reasons we discussed previously. So it's not more natural. It's not less natural. One of the things I'll say frequently is that dogs in the wild die very young as well. So there are changes that we make in captivity that benefit them. Humans in the wild died much younger as well. I have never wanted to be back in the wild without a choice.
Well, I mean, the only choice is hunter or gatherer, you know? All right. How about this one? This one I'm not familiar with, so I'll be excited to hear this one. Ash content causes urinary issues.
Maybe. Caveat. So ash content is going to be basically all the minerals that are in your pet's food. So the phosphorus, the calcium, all of those things. If you have a specific type of urinary crystal and that ash content is really high in a particular mineral that is contributing to that urinary crystal, then maybe. But just ash content, generally speaking, is not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just the name for all the minerals in the food. And a high ash content does not necessarily mean it's going to give your dog crystals. The crystals are more to do with the specific components that create that particular crystal that your dog has and your dog's ability to process and eliminate those minerals or sources basically from their urine.
All right. I get 2 more for you. Cats should eat unlimited dry food because they'll self-regulate.
Cats should not eat unlimited dry food because they don't self-regulate. They're all fat. I see them every day. So one of the important things that I also brought up yesterday with that client I mentioned before is that cats in the wild. So if you go to Animal Kingdom over here in Orlando and you see the lions, they talk about how they spend 20 hours a day sleeping and 4 hours a day hunting, right? Most of the lions are in shape because, well, in the wild anyway, because that hunting takes a lot of energy. They're able to burn off a lot of calories while they do that. And food is not reliable every day. So they might go long periods of time where they aren't able to hunt and catch food because they're not necessarily a pack animal. For cats that are in captivity, they're not hunting and they're being fed on a regular basis. So we've messed with that formula and you've taken an animal that has learned to gorge itself because food is uncertain and you've taken away the effort they have to put into getting that food and you've taken away the uncertainty. So cats will continue to gorge themselves. In most cases, every cat's different, but I wouldn't recommend free feeding them.
Okay. Last one here. This is a fun one as well. Homemade diets are healthier.
just like for humans, not necessarily. So if you can have a good homemade diet, you can have a bad homemade diet. You can have a good homemade diet, really importantly, that your dog picks and chooses which parts of it to eat and turns it into a bad homemade diet. So I've seen all of the above. I personally don't do homemade diets because I just don't have time for it. It's not to say that you couldn't do it properly, but it's a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money, a lot of energy going into a particular aspect of your pet's health that could be met more efficiently. And those funds could be put towards an emergency fund or something like that.
When you mentioned them picking out the little bits and pieces, I just literally picture my kids eating the marshmallows out of Lucky Charms box and leaving the
Dude,
byproduct, the ash.
that's what it is. Your dog is a toddler. They
Yeah.
will train you like a toddler trains you to give them the food that they want. They will pick and choose the parts that they like the best because they are a toddler in the end. And your job is to not negotiate with terrorists. Your job is to make sure they get the food that they need to get.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that wraps up our lightning round of red flags. We will continue to work on that, and because we got a little bit longer towards the end, explanations a little longer. Good, very good explanations. But I'm gonna keep you on the spot next round, next red flags.
You should get a timer.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. It'd be cool having a screen, but then all the viewers at home. I guess if we have a buzzer, I'll have an air horn ready right here, and in the clinic will wonder what's going on behind me. Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Mosites, for all your useful information as well as your fun stories. We are wrapping up segment 2 of our pet nutrition segment. Be sure to listen to the first one already if you haven't, and then catch up here. We have a third one, maybe even a fourth. There's just a lot of information to cover here, and we want to make sure you hear it all. If you aren't already, make sure you are following all of our socials. We are on YouTube. We are on Spotify, Apple Music. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Google, Yelp us. We're getting everywhere out there. So if you can find us, like us, subscribe, leave comments if you have any questions or any, maybe you want to tell us a funny story that you had from your clinic. Leave it there and we'd love to talk about it on the next podcast. All right. Until next time, signing off from the Mermaid Vet Hospital.
Thanks, guys.